live Instagram broadcast. I'm Jason Haas. As always, I will start by giving you a little visual tour of what's going on here at the winery. And then I have a guest, and in this case, you're lucky. You get a 2-for-1 special. I have two guests, Nate and Sarah Walsh from Walsh Family Wine in Virginia. They have been incredibly on top of it in the pivot during COVID to virtual events. They've created this incredible series called Drink Well. So I'm interested to talk to them about that, and also to talk to them about sort of how they are feeling about what's going on now and where things stand. Sarah is also, she works for Winebow in her day job, which is our distributor in Virginia. So that was how she and I met, and we'll talk about that side of the world a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to start, as I usually do, by showing some pictures. So it is the very peak of harvest, but that said, it is a peak because everything is ready, and it's just a question of how fast can we get stuff in. So we are picking Mourvèdre and Counoise and Roussanne and Picpoul today. This is Counoise bins on the crush pad. You can see all of the barrels in the background. We're barreling stuff down. I'm going to try to give you a little sense of just what a day like this is like in the cellar. First, a Counoise cluster. You can see how big and beautiful those berries are. Okay, pressing. We have Roussanne in the press right now. So this is our latest ripening white, and that's getting pressed off. This is our second press load already. We already had a Picpoul press load going. We are pressing reds. Give you a shot of that. So this is pressing off a Mourvèdre lot from earlier in the harvest. We are draining tanks. You can see we are draining this is a Syrah tank where we've done a submerged cap fermentation. So again, all sorts of stuff going on. A quick tour of the cellar. I thought that would be a good way of getting at what all we're looking at. So in our main cellar room, you can see we've got open top fermenters all down the middle of the room. Some are full, some are empty, awaiting the things that are being destemmed right now. In our white room, we have barrels. You can see a couple people in the back checking sugars and alcohol contents of everything. Our normal barrel room, we've moved a lot of the barrels out in order to make room for some macro bins, for some small lot fermentations. Our wooden upright room, I'm standing on top of 2 of them. You can see 4 more. We have 6 of these big 1,500-gallon wooden oak uprights. These are mostly full, with the exception of the one that I was standing on, which is empty, again, because it's going to get some of the grapes that we're picking today. And then finally, last room, our foudre room, where we age all of our reds. That's just sitting quietly. There's nothing going on in there right now, other than that's where all of our 2019s are safely out of the way. So that's it, I think. That's my quick introduction. It is a zoo on the crush pad right now, in a really great way. Everything's going on. So I'm going to get rid of the photos. I'm going to ask Nate and Sarah to join. Okay. Again, if you have questions you want to ask us, I know we got a couple of questions that were sent in advance, but please feel free to add them in the comments as we had, and we'll get to them. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Nate.
Hey, Jason.
How are things in Virginia right now?
Oh my gosh. So we are having the most beautiful day. It's like 70 and sunny, a little bit breezy. It doesn't get much better than this in Virginia.
Awesome. And
how are things in Paso?
Good. It's kind of normal mid-October weather. It's supposed to top out in the mid-80s today. It was 44 at my house this morning. Again, that's normal as you get towards the end of harvest. It gets quite chilly at night. The days are short. I mean, we've had some 90-degree days in the last week, but the nights have been at the very least, the low 50s. So just getting the last few things, the last bit of ripeness.
That's awesome.
Where are you guys with harvest? Are you done? Are you
No,
Just in the middle? Are you buried
we're in the
grapes?
middle. We're
We're in that point where my husband doesn't sleep well at night.
that's exactly where we are. So
Does that give you an idea?
I don't know. That lasts for months with me at this time of year. But,
so we're on to the reds. We actually just finished picking the last of our Merlot, which is our earliest ripening red. That and sometimes Tannat, and we're sort of entering Cab Franc world, which is almost a week of picking for us. We probably will be finished in about 10 days, but we're still in the thick of it.
and how does this compare to like an average year for you?
It's better than average. It overall, we've been very happy. It was a little bit the growing season in general was very good for us until late August when it got just a little more humid than we like here. So us as well as a lot of growers struggled a little bit with downy mildew and also some of the early ripening whites. But after that, it's been, I mean, the day that you just described, which is what we've been having here, which is 75 and sunny, and then it gets down to 47. We're like on the second straight week of that. It's been wonderful.
It's really nice.
Awesome.
Leave with your windows open. It's funny, Jason, when I was walking in, we're at the tasting room. We're hiding in Nate's office right now. I saw our Ben, who's our vineyard manager, on the way in. He was bringing fruit in. And I said, hey, I'm going live with Jason. What do you want me to ask him? And he was like, how raisiny do they let their Tannat get? And I was like, ooh, that's a good question.
So not raisiny, but definitely no longer fully inflated. So
Yeah.
it's like just that kind of sweet spot where it's like the balloon that you've left out for an hour. It's not flat, but it's also
sort of starting to get, yeah.
I call them like old man wrinkles. Like they're like it just looks a little saggy.
Perfect.
Yeah, we brought Tannat in last week, end of last week, and it was, man, beautiful.
Yeah, last week was it last week? Yeah, last week was Tannat week for us too. So
Oh, really?
we're on the same schedule for that grape.
Yeah, but we haven't started pressing any reds yet. So I think you all probably started earlier than us with reds, but
yeah, Tannat's kind of in the middle of the cycle for us, not at the beginning. Yeah. So, I mean, we've been done with Syrah for 3 weeks plus already in the cellar. So, or not in the cellar, but in the vineyard. So we've got those Syrah lots finishing. Most of our Grenache, we picked the last Grenache lots on Monday of this week, but most of that was picked 2 to 3 weeks ago.
and how has it been there?
Well, I mean, California's had kind of an apocalyptic fall in a lot of ways, but
we've been peripherally following along, but I wasn't sure how far north of you all that was.
Pretty far north. I mean, you think of where the big fires were. There were some up in Monterey County, which is like 60 miles north of us. Those were the closest. And then the bulk of them, the fires, the big fire in Santa Cruz, that's like 150 miles from us. And then the Napa Sonoma fires are 250 miles from us.
Yeah.
So it's not close, but because of the way that the weather patterns have been, the kind of bad fire weather out here is when you've got a high pressure system that sits over California and pushes air offshore instead of drawing the cooler air and the moister air off the Pacific onshore. And those sorts of weather patterns, they tend to be pretty still. They bring that air from the inland out to us, as opposed to the more normal weather patterns where you're blowing any smoke that might be, you're blowing it east. So we had some stretches in August where there was a fair amount of smoke at the surface for a few days. And then we had a stretch in September where it was fine at the surface, but it was so dense up above that we didn't see the sun for 3 days because it was just this smoke overcast layer up high. So I shared some pictures of it. I mean, it looks like the end of the world, but I don't know that the vines particularly noticed. And in terms of what we're seeing with the fruit, I mean, the fruit looks good. The flavors look good. Our yields actually look better than last year. We were expecting them to be lower than last year, but they don't. They look good.
I love hearing that.
I know. I feel I feel a little bit like I should look over my shoulder for a meteor or something whenever I say something positive.
A sinkhole opens up underneath you, and away you go.
Thank you, 2020. But no, in the grand scheme of things, we're cautiously optimistic about this year's harvest, and
That's great.
It's really almost done. We should be done by the beginning of next week.
It's interesting being out in the market talking to buyers, specifically, I mean, Oregon and California, to be honest. There's a lot of like doom and gloom, and our price is going to go up, and how is the supply chain going to be influenced? And there's a lot of like trepidation right now for it's because the East Coast consumes a lot of West Coast wine, and I almost sometimes fear that the news cycle in a way like makes consumers and buyers in that way like a little fearful. They're like, oh no, there's not going to be any wine, the prices are going to double, everything's not going to taste good. And you're like, no, like it's not, there are pockets where it's not great, but like there's still going to be wine made in California in 2020, and lots of it will be fantastic. So a lot of what I've been doing is just like reassuring people.
Yeah, I mean the thing, and I grew up in Vermont, so I grew up in a little state on the East Coast where there were lots of other states nearby. People who haven't spent time out here don't realize how big California is, and the fact that we are the same distance from Napa as you are from New York. And you get down to, so I mean, basically California is 2/3 the height of the United States. So there's so many different things that happen within the state, and that has led, or the lack of understanding of that has led a lot of people, I think, to assume that basically California wine country is Napa, and it's better than it was 15 years ago, where I would say we're from Paso Robles, and people would say, what part of Napa is that in? But it's still influenced by the fact that that's where a lot of the wine journalism is based, and that's the name that people know. So it's sort of like, as goes Napa Cabernet, so goes the vintage in California. Whereas, and that's some years you can at least get some useful information out of that, but not a year like 2020.
I have no generalizations for 2020 at this point.
Wait and see. Like, hope we make it through, and then see what the pieces look like.
Jason, I actually think I knew about the Vermont tie, but forgot it. Have you had any Vermont wine?
I have not. I've had lots of Vermont cider, and I've been reading a little bit about some of the Vermont wine. But it really was not a thing when I was spending a ton of time there. And I just haven't dug any up in my couple of visits in recent years. It was going to be one of the things I did on my summer visit to Vermont this year, which didn't happen. Do you have recommendations?
Well, no. They're not exactly readily available. But I know, there's some cool stuff happening up there, and it's gotten to be kind of trendy, at least on the East Coast, and you're seeing a lot of natural wine producers and things like that. So I wasn't sure if you had experienced any of it.
No, not really. I mean, I remember my dad tried to plant some grapes when I was growing up in Vermont, and like they would live for 5 years and then they'd freeze, and then they'd replant them and they'd live for 4 years and then they'd freeze.
The Thomas Jefferson effect.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm happy that I'm not trying to grow grapes in Vermont. I mean, I think you have, in a lot of ways, you have the deck stacked against you, but it's not a wildly different climate than a lot of the places in Northern Europe that are doing beautiful stuff. So it'd be an exploration for the future.
Yeah. Well, especially just if you're going to get to go back there, it'll be cool to have some production that you can see.
Yeah, for sure.
Next summer, I'm sure.
I figure 50 more years of climate change, it'll be like right the sweet spot for wine in America.
We'll have to move north.
Never know.
So I was hoping that you guys would tell a little bit of the story of Walsh family. I mean, talk about how the how you both got started in wine, how the winery got started, and kind of what you like, what your focus is now, and just kind of where locate people for, because a lot of our people
Yeah.
who are
I love telling this story,
who are
I mean,
actually.
you're
winemakers. A
gonna
lot
do.
of them are
Yeah,
pretty,
totally
California
gonna do
Virginia
it.
is a long way away.
Yeah, so we are about an hour, just under an hour northwest of Washington, D.C. That's usually where, and comically, we're like 20 minutes from one of the D.C. airports. So we are interestingly situated. We're just far enough north on the East Coast that we can grow vinifera here. Much further south of here, you see a lot more hybrids and kind of Native American grapes. We get cold enough winters here to do vinifera, but we're also far south enough on the East Coast that we can still do what I consider like a New World style of wine. So oftentimes when you get up towards the Finger Lakes in New York and Ontario, you get more like kind of Bavarian styles, Rieslings, Gruners, amazing wines. But I feel like Virginia kind of hits that sweet spot, and we happen to be lucky that we are right on the Blue Ridge where the Appalachian Trail runs through. And I feel like that's like a big marker for people when they think about where we are. So a lot of our sites are based around the Appalachian Trail and the altitude that gives us, and honestly, the ability to drain water on those sites, because it almost feels bad to say it, but like we suffer from quite the opposite problems of California, where we have sometimes too much water, where you guys generally struggle with having not enough water. So, but we started, my background, as you mentioned when you introduced us, I work proudly for the importer that distributes Tablas Creek in Virginia. So that company, when I started, was called Country Vintner. It's now Winebow. So I've been with them for 10 years. And when I started with that position, I immediately was like, my background in wine was very restaurant based. So I knew a lot about selling wine to an end consumer. I had a lot to learn about selling wine to a wine buyer. And so I immediately enrolled at the Capital Wine School in DC. It's run by our regional master of wine, Jay Yeomans, who's fantastic, and studied through the WSET. And when I started there, they strongly encouraged everyone, not just me, to go out. Like, they're like, you live in wine country, you're so lucky. A lot of this is so much easier to learn, just go get your hands dirty. So the winery that I reached out to like do some volunteer work was the winery where Nate was the winemaker. And
that was it.
Yeah, we hit it off, and we were married a year later. Yeah. And so Nate's background is in grape growing and winemaking, worked in Central Virginia, but also in Oregon and in New Zealand. And Passion Project Wine, and we got a call from a gentleman. Nate's the president of the Virginia Vineyards Association, so he oftentimes gets calls from people who have prospective vineyard sites, or they inherit a vineyard, or they have vineyard questions, and you're in our area. So a gentleman called. He bought a 200-acre farm, and on that 200-acre farm there was a 4-acre vineyard site. He did not grow grapes, he does not make wine, but he was aware of the fact that it was valuable. So he actually reached out to Nate, and Nate came out to kind of consult or give some advice, and was immediately blown away at the caliber of the site. And here where we are in Virginia, there's still we're still really figuring out where the good sites are. And so oftentimes you see established vineyards that maybe weren't put in the best sites.
Yeah.
So we were very excited to like be introduced to this 15-year-old beautiful vineyard site, perfectly sloped. southeast facing, gorgeous. And so Nate just asked the guy basically on the spot, like, could we lease these 4 acres from you for a personal project?
And that
It was
it.
a really romantic idea.
But we thought it would be a fun way to kind of work together, like on the weekends, and do this small thing. And then I would just work for another winery and Sarah would work for the distributor. But we just like are incapable of saying no to anything. So we started,
it just grew.
we started getting more vineyards, and then we started planting sites, and we just kind of grew the whole thing.
So now we have a tasting room, and we are farming a total of 50 acres on 6 different vineyard sites, all within our county.
You realized that this was inevitable. Like from the very beginning, that you were like, "Oh, we're just going to do this little small project that never works."
No, but it's been really fun. I mean, it is a ton of work, and I am still working for Winebow, and that's still, you know, like that's my day job. That's what I do during the week. I'm just at the winery on the weekends, and Nate is really kind of full tilt here at the winery. But the commute, I will say, what's shocked both of us, and I actually wrote about this for the Virginia Wine Board. I think we were both very excited about the winemaking and getting the wines in bottle and like introducing them to people. And I'm sure you've seen this in Paso. The community that you build when you open a space and open your doors to people around you, it's been so rewarding in that way. And in a way that I don't think we had even thought of.
Yeah.
So we're very grateful.
It's totally true. And I mean, we came at this with the idea that we were going to sell everything through wholesale. Like we came at starting this winery 30 years ago with a business plan that included no tasting room, no wine club, no website, no direct sales, nothing. Like there used to be a sign on the gates at Calera that my dad had a picture of, which said, "Don't even think of coming in if you don't have an appointment." And like that was my dad's vision for what this was going to be like. And of course, it turned out to be a completely unrealistic way of building a business. And we had to reinvent who we were and what we did kind of in the early 2000s. And just watching the way that has built not just the recognition of Tablas Creek, but built our engagement with the community that's here in Paso Robles and with the other wineries, and meant that we can be kind of this clearinghouse for information with people in our cellars and out, and exchanging information and sharing farming and sharing equipment. And all of this has proved to be this incredibly gratifying and wonderful part of this business that was not at all what we were expecting at the beginning.
Yeah. Very similar for us.
So talk a little bit, if you would, about kind of how that informed the creation of Drinkwell and your own decisions as you saw. I mean, you were on this really early, and I learned a lot from participating in the one that you invited me to participate in, and then using that as kind of a model. Okay, what can we use? How can we build off of something like this that's appropriate for us? So can you talk a little bit about how that came about and what you've learned since you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to back up just a little bit, when we were farming and making wine before we had the tasting room, we realized that it was hard just having wholesale business to really get in front of end consumers and tell your story. And when we opened the tasting room, it was really important for us to kind of offer that platform to other wineries or winemakers who had small passion projects, or we just wanted to make sure if there were people doing small but really interesting things that we kind of gave people that opportunity that we felt like we couldn't find. So from the inception of opening the tasting room, we did like bar takeover Fridays. So we would have a guest winemaker come in, pour their wines, tell their stories. It was really fun for us because we got to meet and support so many fun people. The people who normally come to see us thought, really enjoyed that as well, because, it's a really great way to kind of experience a broader range of wines in this space. And so that, because we kind of already had that when COVID happened, we almost already had a little bit of a model to work off of for Drinkwell. So we were like, well, let's just take, I think we immediately knew, and this probably is very, because you guys have lots of SKUs across the brand. We probably have 10 wines. And so even at the beginning of COVID, when you weren't entirely sure how long it was going to go for, you kind of had an idea that, like, if you only have 10 wines, you're not going to be able to, like, sustain this for very long.
We got 10 weeks worth.
And so we were like, well, let's kind of parlay this bar takeover into the virtual series. So it's us, but it's also our friends, and we get to continue introducing our customers and our supporters to the wines, both locally and domestically and abroad, that we are so inspired by. And so that's kind of that was where the kind of springboard for Drinkwell was. But I think we also just, like, I was like, I need to talk to my people. Like,
well, I will say,
I don't want to, I mean, I love you, but like,
well, it's a mixture of how do we stay in front of people, but also, you know, it is connected to how we had been on this sort of our vineyard management was going up and our production was going up. And as you know, the sales are a couple of years behind that. And we were, when everything was shutting down, we saw in like an alarming way, we're like, we've got to do something to stay in front of people, we just got to keep shipping wine to people. Like, so when Virginia shut down, I think it was a Sunday, and we cleaned up and threw the trash in the dumpster and locked the door, and we went home and we were like, we got to plan it now. Like, we have to,
send out an email tomorrow.
We got to send out an email tomorrow. Like, what are we going to do? And so it was kind of a mixture of these things of, like, we were scared about knowing that we needed to sell wine. And it was this is only the second year we've been open as a tasting room. So we were sort of financially scared, to be honest. Yeah. And then also we already had these takeovers, like Sarah said. So I think it was kind of a combination of all these things. And we just...
So some combination of terror and inspiration.
Yeah. That's what all the best things are.
And also, like, for me, because I wasn't going out and seeing restaurants or seeing restaurateurs, and, you know, I'm not pulling samples or anything like that. So I was like, how do I keep drinking all these wines that I love so much? I'm like, I just invite them to be in a virtual tasting with us. It worked.
I think it was such a good idea, and the way that you did it was so community minded that it seems like the kind of thing that, like, everybody would support. I mean, it was whatever. So such a good idea. I think it was really smart the way you put it together.
It's still going, but it's going just twice a month.
Yeah, same thing. Like, these, we've shifted. We used to be doing, I was doing an Instagram live broadcast every week, and Neil, our winemaker, was doing a Facebook live tasting with a guest winemaker once a week. And we ended up saying, okay, that's too much. Now that we're reopened, now that harvest has started, we're just going to alternate weeks. So,
yeah.
I think, I don't know. So what's your thought? Do you think you're going to keep doing those Drinkwell tastings indefinitely? Do you think it's something that has been valuable enough to keep doing even after things get back to normal, whatever that looks like, whenever that is?
I don't think we know.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I think
we will continue to do them as long as people continue to want us to do them.
If people feel like it's valuable. It's enjoyable for us. We're aware that possibly this winter, probably people will be a little more, not want to go out as much, and so they might be more interested in them like they were in the spring. So we're kind of planning for that. You know, this time next year, if it's something people are interested in, we would keep doing it. We enjoy it.
We're trying to become famous on the internet, Jason. So
one Facebook Live at a time.
Yeah, our millions of loyal followers would be devastated if we gave it up.
I agree. I'm sure you would see like riots and pitchforks out front demanding that you
Can't
resume.
stop.
And one of the things, there's a comment, a couple comments that have come through that touch on one of the reasons why I think that these sorts of things are such a connecting. Back? You guys back?
Sorry.
It could be
Sorry,
us.
I don't know. I think
Yeah,
that was
we're
on my end,
here.
that one. So one of the things that I think has been a failing of wine and wineries is that they've really required the customers to make the effort to go and get to where the wineries are. So either that means walking physically through a tasting room door, or it means going to a wine festival where the winery is pouring, or it means going to a wine dinner at a restaurant where the winery has gone. And the thing that's appealing about so many of these virtual events is that they meet the customers where the customers are. And
Yeah.
we can't be in enough places to even hit 10% of our current customers in a normal month. I mean, let alone the potential customers that we might have that we just don't have because we can't get there. And it's one of the reasons why I feel like to at least at some level, these sorts of things are going to end up being really valuable pieces of winery marketing mixes in the long term.
We were very surprised when we started doing the virtual drink well tastings where the wines went. Because I think we assumed like it's all going to be people who are right here, people who are within half an hour of the winery who have been here. They're supporting us because they know us and they want us to stick around. We were shipping wines all over the place.
We were shipping wines to states we'd never heard of. All over the place.
There's no East Dakota.
Yeah. We won't say which one.
Arkansas. Yeah, and so it was really eye-opening for us, and I know for you guys, you have such a robust and broad wine club, but our wine club is really localized. And so the idea that people were like in Florida and in Ohio and in Texas, drinking Virginia wine, but B, like engaged in and like following along and asking questions. It was shocking, but in like the best possible way.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Inspiring.
And like thinking about like how, like you're saying, this is an opportunity for like, you know, winemakers, growers, etc., to go to the people. And it's, you know, I think what we've seen is there's a bigger audience for real, what we would consider to be like real technical information, like digging down a little bit deeper. There's a bigger audience for that than I thought there would be, which is wonderful. And especially for a industry that sometimes is a little mysterious or markets themselves as being a little bit mysterious and hard to approach. I think these are like a great way to sort of break that barrier down a little bit.
And it also gets people face to face with the winemakers and the owners in a way. I mean, even if you visit your average tasting room in Napa, you're certainly not meeting the owners or the winemakers. I mean, even in Paso, which is smaller and a little more rural, and you're more likely to. I mean, I'm not standing on our tasting room floor most of the time now, but with these sorts of live events, I mean, you're getting the principles of the wineries too. So there's kind of there's an access piece of it that I think is appealing for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. It's been half an hour. It really flew by. I could talk to you guys for another half hour easy, but
let's do it, because otherwise I have to go help the guys clean fresh bag. So,
well, I don't want to be responsible for that either. But so, how do people learn more about Walsh family?
So we exist on all social media platforms. Instagram, as you see here, Facebook, Twitter. I know you guys do Twitter better than we do, but we do have one. But also there's a website. We ship. We have a wine club. And then we continue to host Drink Well, which streams actually on Facebook Live because they generally go over the time limit of Instagram. And those you can find the information for on our website as well. There's a Drink Well tab.
And the drink wells, are they the same day of the week every week or whatever? Every week?
Yeah, Fridays at 5, but not, it's every other Friday.
Right. Great way to wrap up the work week.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, it is wonderful to see you both. Thank you for returning the hospitality and coming to join me virtually here in California. I can't wait till we can get together and do this in person.
That would be great.
Us too. Thanks for having us.
So nice to see you, Jason. We're
Awesome.
wishing you guys all the success for the rest of harvest.
Thank you. You too. Last little bits. Can't wait to taste the 2020s from Virginia.
We'll send you some. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Nate and Sarah. Thank you, everybody who joined us this week. The conditions are good here. You may have seen that our tasting room was closed a couple of days recently for heat or for smoke. I do not anticipate that being the case going forward, which is great. And we'll be finishing up with harvest. Look for an update. We will send out a newsletter next week with hopefully the wrap up. So thank you so much, everybody who joined. And I will see you in 2 weeks.